Dear Tsitsi, you are an extraordinary philanthropist and social entrepreneur, and I'm excited to learn more today about your work to build strategic philanthropy across the African continent. Tsitsi Masiyiwa is executive chair and co-founder of the Higherlife Foundation, founded by Tsitsi and her husband Strive Masiyiwa in 1996, I believe, and based in Zimbabwe. The foundation invests in human capital development to build thriving communities and sustainable livelihoods, and its portfolio encompasses impact investments in education and leadership development, healthcare and sanitation, job creation, and rural transformation. Tsitsi is a trusted advisor and thought partner to universities, to national leaders, and social entrepreneurs on issues of education, leadership development, and youth empowerment. Tsitsi is also a chairperson of the END Fund, which mobilizes global resources for neglected tropical diseases. She sits on many other boards and advisory boards, and her work has garnered global recognition, including honorary doctorate degrees from Morehouse University in Atlanta, Georgia, Africa University in Mutare, Zimbabwe, as well as the prestigious Champions for Change Award for leadership from the International Center for Research on Women. Tsitsi and her husband Strive are signatories to the Giving Pledge. Tsitsi was also a founding member and pioneer and board chair of the African Philanthropy Forum, established in 2014 to build a learning community of strategic African philanthropists and social investors. Over the years, the APF has established a strong presence on the continent with footprints in, I believe, 14 African countries. And this is where I would like to begin. So, dear Tsitsi, you are a remarkable leader who's been personally engaged in building philanthropic infrastructure through the APF to support strategic philanthropy in Africa. This is a mission for the global growth markets that I also believe in very strongly. Can you tell us why you think that infrastructure provides the leverage to accelerate the impact of philanthropy on the African continent, and what are some of the gaps that you think still exist in the system that need to be filled?
Thank you so much, Badr, for having me, and it's such an honor. And I love philanthropy. It's something that I do because it's part and parcel of my DNA. I just want to say I used to be the chair of the African Philanthropy Forum, which was founded by Global Philanthropy Forum as a project, but we were instrumental in turning it from a project into an organization, and which is really thriving at the moment. So, African Philanthropy Forum has really grown to be an important voice that talks about philanthropy from the perspective of Africans. Philanthropy is something that is timeless. It's been there since the beginning of time because it's love for humanity, and it's expressed in different ways. And as Africans, we express it very much influenced by our culture, as it is in other different continents as well. But at African Philanthropy, it's also has over time developed into an organization that is really focused on amplifying the voices of all philanthropy, but heavily focused on strategic philanthropy. What do I mean by strategic philanthropy? Where resources are mobilized in order to really move the needle or cause systems change through collaborations with other philanthropists and different types of partnerships. Now, where do we see gaps? The first gap is one of perception. I think there is still this perception that all philanthropy must be modeled around the global north type of philanthropy. And we forget that in the global north, a lot of the legal systems and frameworks are built to encourage philanthropy and all manner of incentives, which not necessarily have anything to do with love for humanity, but because it makes financial sense to give. So those structures make it very difficult sometimes to collaborate, because there's an expectation that when you go into a collaboration, the global south philanthropist must put money into a global north organization in the US dollar. And we forget that the world in which we live in is global, and every country has its own currency, which is equally as valuable, especially when you start spending money or investing in anything. And some of those gaps, I think, of perception needs to close. They do take time. And then, of course, another gap is marrying the priorities of the communities versus the passion of the philanthropist. There's such a major gap there, and that one is a very difficult one, and it's common across the board.
The Higherlife Foundation, which of course you founded in 1996 with Strive, has had major impact in Zimbabwe and beyond. Could you tell us why you started the foundation in the first place, and also how it's evolved over the past years in terms of its priorities, perhaps? And can you also tell us a little bit more about why you are so passionate about the foundation's mission to develop human potential?
So the foundation was started through our own Strive and I's faith in God. It's very much something very personal to us as a family, and part of our expressing our faith. So that was part of it. And then part of it was also, it was born at a time when HIV/AIDS was a pandemic just roaring through the world and country by country in a manner that was heartbreaking. Many of us lost our family members. I always talk about my aunt who had 9 children, and all of them died from HIV and AIDS. And that would really would be a subject of discussion all the time on what can we do. Then we didn't have money, but we had strong desire to do something. And we felt education was the best way in which we could contribute to solving the problem. And our education would be focused on the children, the orphaned children that were left behind. So we started before the business was established as a dream that one day when we have money, that is where our philanthropy would go. And, as you'd have it, we set up the business in 1998. And although the work of the foundation started in 1996, and then we've, continued to just grow. Initially, it was emotional giving, and very much driven by feelings and emotions, and less by being strategic and building systems. So over time, we brought in professionals who helped us to put in the systems that made it efficient to do the work, and also be able to measure the impact and ensure that resources were put where they should be. And so we have really evolved to be a lot more structured and yet deeply connected to the communities in which we serve. We like human capital development because at the end of the day, whether it's a health issue, an education issue, agriculture issue, commerce, entrepreneurship, at the center, what holds the center is education. You invest in people, you're able to have the skills and the talents that are required to tackle the issues of poverty, and also to do it in a way that is sustainable and that is also long-term.
Do you think that philanthropy in Africa has changed since you began your own journey? And if so, what role do you believe is being played by the next generation who are inheriting a wealth and also beginning their respective giving journeys?
Well, philanthropy has changed a lot. There's a lot more collaboration than there was before among local philanthropists, and also philanthropists from different regions. It's something that young people aspire to become. It's common to hear young people say, oh, you know, when I'm successful, I would love to ensure that I become a philanthropist. It's something people admire, which is really excellent. We've always been generous people all over the world. In Africa, generosity is our hallmark. However, philanthropy allows us to express our generosity in ways that are more impactful and where there are more resources to do it at scale. So these are some of the changes we have seen from just focusing on education to getting into using education as the primary way in which we do our philanthropy, but in different sectors. Also, there's a lot more wealth, high net worth individuals than we've ever seen. Personally, I wish people would be more generous. I still think high net worth individuals are focused on what they love to do in their communities and something that is directly related to them. And I wish that there just would be more of that effort of exploring areas where we have no vested interest in, but collectively we are able to really do something at scale and partner, especially with effective philanthropy. I believe the importance of partnering with the government, be aligned with what the government is prioritizing, because if you have your own priorities that are unrelated to what the government is focusing on, the problem you fall into is philanthropy can never solve. We can never have the resources that are required. The biggest mobilizer of resources is the government. So philanthropy fills in the gaps. And to do that effectively, you have to marry your vision and the national vision. And also there are amazing organizations that have data and that are focused on feeding into national strategies. Your World Health Organization, so many in finance, in agriculture, in education. So being able to break it down to national level and then seeing how philanthropy can use flexible funding and use also long-term funding to do the things that government cannot do. I think the changing faces also that I think philanthropists have become a lot smarter and more effective by not trying to copy what the government is doing, but to complement and fill in the gaps. So they play a very important catalytical role that I have seen happen time and time again, and very important. And of course, with the next generation, I think we are still in the early stages. Next generation has a growing voice in amplifying issues that our generation has not been able to do, especially issues around race, inequalities that arise because of race, colonialism, the impact of colonialism on the continent, etc. They are bolder. I think we are honestly standing on the shoulders of what the young people have been willing to discuss and to say that we did not discuss in our boardrooms previously, and which is an exciting period we are in. However, the power to allocate resources, power signing the checks is still with the older generation. So I think we need a bit more time. Maybe within the next decade, we'll really see a real shift of wealth to the next generation, and also their ability to decide how resources are allocated. They're more bullish than we are, and also there's an impatience in the way they like to bring change. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So many beautiful things you said there, and I especially like your reference to selfless giving, which I think in many respects is the sort of ultimate form of giving that we all aspire to do, to take ourselves out of the equation when we make these various decisions.
Yeah.
You talked obviously also a lot about collaboration, and so I know you're passionate about working closely with partners. Higherlife works closely with other organizations, including I think another one of your family's organizations, Delta Philanthropies, if I'm not mistaken, to implement your many programs. Can you tell me more about what partnership models you believe work best to maximize impact? And also, what do you think are the possibilities for more collaborative or pooled funds in future within Africa's philanthropic landscape?
So when I look at philanthropy, it's happening at all levels. So you have at one level, the crowdfunding, where individuals are giving, whether you're giving $1, a pound, a naira, a shilling, a rand, whatever. And we have millions and millions of people who are doing that. And they do it also through their churches or places of worship. They do it through their communities. They do it through their networks. And that has really been impactful. And then you have another level of giving, which is your small grants, where community organizations, especially those that are do focus on spaces in our communities where the disadvantaged are not able to get resources. For example, people living with disabilities, where small communities need small loans, women need small loans for whatever projects that they do, small agricultural projects. So you find there are many grant makers who give those kind of small loans without an expectation of sustainability, financial sustainability. So that is a model that is important and also keeps the foundations stable. Then the next is your project giving, which we are now finding very common among your donor agencies, USAID, and the various aid agencies from different parts of the world. They tend to give big, but it's project funding. When the money runs out, that's the end of the project and people disperse, and sometimes the project ends before the impact has been achieved or the goal has been achieved, which is really sad. But, you know, it's still a model that's important, but I think it's growing less and less in importance. And then you have the big bet type of funding, where you are, and there I include impact investment as well, where you are focused on systemic change. For example, in what we do in neglected tropical diseases, where our goal is to eliminate certain diseases like elephantiasis, river blindness. So you have big philanthropists. Examples of those are your Gates, reaching the last mile, Elma, different Dangote. They tackle these very big issues that require a lot of resources and long-term funding. And I've also seen that be very impactful. So we've seen many different models of that that come in that form and shape. Your Blue Meridian, Core Impact, Audacious is another one, and they're very impactful, I must say. And you also just see an amazing level of generosity that is quite uncommon. So all those different models are quite effective, and we see, like I said, the impact and the effectiveness of recognizing, however, that all the different types of giving are important. Some can target small communities, others target whole sectors or nations or regions. Whichever model it is, it's important, and it's part and parcel of what our societies need in order to bring the transformation we want to see and to see prosperity in our communities. Yeah.
Indeed. Finally, do you see a promising future for impact investing and other social finance approaches within Africa? Is that something that you think is becoming more popular over time, including perhaps by the next generation?
With impact investment, I think we went through a season when there was a lot of momentum around impact investment. And now I see like things have plateaued a bit. It's very difficult to have philanthropists discuss, on one hand, pure philanthropy where there's no expectation of financial return. The return is impact, versus now having discussions around profit, because the communities philanthropy is targeting are your most vulnerable. So to bring in a profit motive, even if the returns are much lower than what we normally find in a for-profit business, still the pressure of some kind of return, I think, has made it very difficult to see the growth we would like to see. And I think a lot of the leadership that drives impact investment are coming from the private sector, and not enough have a mixture of strong private sector experience and experience also working in the not-for-profit sector. So I think as we see more and more skills and expertise with a mix of both, the narrative is likely to change, and we are going to find it a lot easier, whether it's at family foundation level, or it is at board levels. I think we'll find people more comfortable discussing the two. In most of the circles that I engage with, they have difficulty marrying the two. So what a lot of philanthropists, I'm sure, as you've noticed, do is they will set up the non-profit arm of their philanthropy and a completely separate arm for impact investment. And there's always more that goes to philanthropy and less. And I think there's also a discomfort within society that even if our aspirations and impact investment are aligned with philanthropy, I think society generally has an expectation that if you begin to talk about profit, even if the profits are plowed back into the operations, or the cost of capital is much lower, what have you, just the mention of profit just kind of like makes the approach lose its shine and authenticity. So we've got to change the narrative. And I think if you have a strong mix of for-profit and non-profit leadership running some of these impact investment funds, we can definitely have more impact and see a growth that is so needed. Because like I said earlier, the need is huge and the resources are too few.
Beautifully said. Tsitsi Masiyiwa, we are very grateful for your taking the time to share your experiences with us. Thank you for an inspiring conversation and for serving as such a wonderful role model for your peers in philanthropy and really across the social sector. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Badr, for having me, and also for the work that you do as a philanthropist and as an important voice, a global voice, in challenging us to do more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.